Welcome, traveler. I'm your host, Big J, and I travel the realm collecting stories of local legends to share with the world. The question is, could you be one of them? This is Legends of the Realm. On today's show, we're sitting down with Danielle Torres, owner of Rustic Roots in Alta Vista, Virginia.
Hi, I'm Danielle Torres. I own Rustic Roots in Alta Vista, and we're here on Knights of the Realm.
Glad to be here with you. Thanks for being on the show. So take us back. What was your vision? Tell us a little bit about yourself.
Well, my vision here, I started as a massage therapist back in 2017. I have always enjoyed helping people. I've enjoyed making people feel better about themselves. It's a very important part of everybody's lives. And so when I opened this place, I had worked at a couple of other places before this, and I took everything that I loved from those places and everything that I hated, I left behind. And we designed a studio right here.
Well, that's awesome. So do you want to tell us a little bit about yourself, like, your background a little bit beyond that?
So I was born and raised in Africa. I moved here when I was 19 years old. I did not have a plan when I moved here. This was not where I saw myself, but life changes, things change. I am a single parent with 4 kids, and so the business kind of came out of that. I couldn't find a job that worked with my family. My kids were sick, I had to take time off, I had to leave early for school functions. And so over the time, I just decided that being self-employed seemed to work better with what I needed for my life.
Okay, so it was almost born out of necessity then, because the normal constraints of a 9-to-5 were not going to fit what your family needed specifically with 4 kids and you being by yourself.
And not only that, Americans, you guys are based around a 9-to-5.
Mm-hmm.
Other countries are not like that. Where we come from, family is valued more than what you guys value here, unfortunately. Mm-hmm. And so it wasn't just a necessity. It was the fact that I wanted to be present. I wanted to be able to be there when my kids woke up in the morning and make them breakfast and get them to school. I wanted to be available when they needed me for a teacher-parent conference or a talent show or something. I wanted to be that parent that was in the row. I didn't want to be that parent that wasn't there. I don't want my kids looking out and their whole childhood was, where was mom?
Right, I understand that. I think there's quite a few of us out there that would be away from the 9-to-5 if we could. Unfortunately, our system, it seems like here in this country, has made it so that if you don't work a 9-to-5, it almost like punishes you for not having enough resources and everything else that you need to do. So a lot of people have started their own businesses or side hustles and things like that. So what do you think you're growing up in Africa, did that give you a different mindset when you came here other than just the family focused?
When I moved here, I loved that I was in a first world country. I enjoyed all the, the things that you have. You are able to order groceries online. You're able to do, everything over the phone. Convenience was a great factor, but I also missed the community. I missed being involved with people. I grew up in a very small town. We knew everybody. We didn't have very many strangers. Everybody was known, and I missed that. And I wanted to bring that back here. And so I moved to a small town. I started off in Northern Virginia, in more of a city closer to DC, and I liked it when I moved here. But when I started having kids, I realized I was missing a big fundamental part of that community, going to the grocery store and knowing the teller, bumping into somebody at the pharmacy and knowing them. When I go to my pharmacy now, they know me by name.
Right, that close-knit community, that smaller group.
Yeah, and so, that was how I was raised, and I didn't realize it back then. But it was such a big part of my childhood, remembering that I knew everybody. We were a big family,
Mm-hmm.
And when I lived in Northern Virginia, I didn't know my neighbors.
I got you. So when you're mom of 4, you're like, the 9-to-5 isn't going to work out for me. I realized that. So how did you come up with the idea for Rustic Roots? Like what drove you to come up with that idea specifically?
So when I started off as a sole entrepreneur. I started off just for myself. Mm-hmm. I worked, I went to people's houses, then I rented a small space from a chiropractor for a while. And then last year I had moved into a bigger space after that, and I was actually had my own space, but I was in a space that was designed by somebody else. And so it just didn't work for my space. Last year I got sick. I got diagnosed with cancer in January. I had surgery. Then I had to have my gallbladder removed. And just, with life, I took a couple months off because I just couldn't handle, job, business, and the kids. So I had to cut back.
Got a lot
And
going
while
on.
I cut back, that kind of gave me time to reflect, on what I enjoyed about my business, what needed to change, and what I wanted. You get comfortable, doing what you're doing. And that's the hardest part for most people. I think we get in this like routine of our lives, and we forget to dream. We forget to think that there's other things out there.
Right. We stop thinking about what's that next level, or what else can we do for the community, or what else can we achieve. You just get in that complacency point where you're comfortable and things are working well enough for you. So why change it unless you have to?
Yeah. And, being sick last year, really opened my eyes. And I realized, when they say life is short, life is short. You blink and time's gone. And so it really woke me up to realize that I wanted more for my business. I wanted to really put myself into my job. Like, I wanted to personalize services. I wanted to offer more services. I wanted to be able to service more people. I wanted to be more involved in the community.
Okay, so what are the services you offer here at Rustic Roots?
So at Rustic Roots, we are primarily massage. We do therapeutic massage. We do have facials now. We do skincare, waxing, and some nail services. But we are very much geared to natural health care versus, like artificial ingredients. That was one of the things I noticed when I went home last year and came back here. There are so many ingredients in our food, in our skincare, in our detergents, in our everything.
Yeah, unfortunately, there's a lot of stuff that they put in that's extra. I think I've read an article one time where they were talking about the difference in ingredients and things. And one set of things had 14 ingredients for our country, and then the one they were shipping out to other countries had like 3 or 4 ingredients.
Right. Our FDA here has really loosened its ties on everything. And now I think it's mostly a monetary thing versus what's good for the people.
Yeah, I think so too. So why did it? I think looking around, and we'll do like a walkthrough for the audience there at home, so they can see everything. It looks like you have some vendor space set up. Is that what I'm looking at here?
Yes. So we are going to be catering to other small businesses. I've been reaching out so far. We have the options to do advertising here where you can just put your product in here. And then we also have the option for you to sell your stuff from this store. So I have a lot of space. We're going to be using. I offer a lot of natural products, and so now I'm going to be reaching out to the public and other vendors, stay-at-home moms, stay-at-home dads, people with that side hustle that just don't have the money to have a brick and mortar. Mm-hmm. This is going to be the perfect space for that.
Wow, that'll be really helpful to a lot of those people I know, especially people who are just starting out who don't necessarily know if their brand is going to take off, or really if they have something, until they get a chance to put it out on display and see if people are going to go for it or not. And so that's really beneficial for them to have something like this locally where they could represent their products and not be tied down to a huge brick and mortar costs and all that other stuff just to test their idea.
Right. And so I want to give back to the community. I know what it was like as a small business starting out. I know what it's like to, start from nothing and have to build your way up. Not everybody has that money. The financial restraints are difficult. So this is the perfect thing. It works great for me because that's what I want. I want to bring the community together. I want a place where people can come and share ideas and work together, because that's what we're supposed to be. It takes a village to raise a family. It takes a village. That's what I want here.
Well, that's an amazing goal. I think I'm a big family-oriented person, community-oriented person myself. That's kind of why I've been doing this, to help small businesses such as yourself with, less than large advertising budgets, and not, some of these other companies, they have millions of dollars to run on ads and stuff like that on Facebook, and it's hard to keep up with some of those. So this is my way of kind of giving back to the community, to get out there and talk to people in the community and share their stories. So what's one of the most important lessons you've learned about running a business that you'd wish you'd known earlier?
Some of the biggest hurdles I've had is that, in the beginning, I was running it like a hobby. And I think that was my biggest downfall. I really didn't believe in myself. And I wish I had known that back then, because I feel like if I had had more confidence from the beginning, my dreams I would have gotten there a lot faster. It took me a long time to be like, hey, I'm good at what I do. This is what the community needs. And not only that, I have all these ideas of wanting to help all these other people. And so this is like the perfect middle ground for me. I get to help other businesses, and I get to do what I enjoy.
I gotcha. So kind of circling back to, being a single parent and running a business, how do you balance those two? I know you said that the business was born out of the necessity to have a better schedule for your family. But when you're just starting out, I'm sure that's a lot. So how did you balance those two?
Well, my biggest thing in the beginning was, I looked at all these other businesses and I looked at business models. I took a lot of classes. I went through the Small Business Association in Lynchburg. They're great. The Spark Innovation Center here in Alta Vista is another great resource. Just having a community to go and bounce ideas off of. But at the same time, I met a lot of other people doing the same thing that I was doing with a family. And so your number one priority is always going to be your family. So I did build my business around that. But again, consistency, believing in yourself and really putting yourself into the business and not doing it as a hobby.
I got you.
Because a hobby is like a side job. If you want to make money doing this, you have to really be all in.
Right. So when you were building your business, what was the first moment for you that kind of struck you as, okay, I can actually do this. This is going to work?
When I moved into my own space, when I moved out of the chiropractor's office, I was just renting a room with them. When I moved into my own space, I looked back over the last couple of months, when I was sitting in my living room one day, and I said, I'm actually doing this. I quit my job because I worked at a boutique in Lynchburg. I was trying to balance both. I was like, okay, if I failed and I have a regular job, I've still got income coming in. But then I realized, that I couldn't do both. I was going against the whole reason for becoming self-employed was to own my own time. And I lost that by having a job and my business. And so I woke up and I realized, I'm doing this. I'm making a difference. These people that are coming to see me are telling me that I'm making a difference. It's not all in my head. I'm not pretending. That imposter syndrome is hard. It is super hard, especially recognizing your own skills. And I had thousands of people telling me that I was doing the right thing, but it took me a good long time to actually look back and realize that this is really what I want.
Okay. Kind of flipping the script, was there a point kind of maybe when you were sick where you kind of felt like maybe this wasn't going to work or you were ready to give up?
Yeah, when I got sick last year, it was a big eye-opener, through the business because I really had to evaluate everything. Is this what I wanted to do? Was I going to go back and work for somebody else? Because at that point, it seemed easier. Let's give up all the stress, everything. Let's just go to a 9-to-5, go to work, do my job, go home, and I can just shut down. Because as a business owner, you never leave work.
Right.
Because it's your baby. Mm-hmm. You're constantly worried about stuff. Yes, I have gotten better at, shutting off when I leave here, but I'm still a business owner.
Right.
And so everything, I'm always thinking about this. But after all of that, I can't say that I've regretted making that decision. It helped me end that first part, and it's not a failure, but I opened the door for something better.
Right. Awesome. Looking at the future, 5 years down the road, what do you see or want to see for Rustic Roots?
So the biggest thing I want here is to be able to service a bigger part of the community. So we are bringing in employees this time. Last year when I was open, I was still just me. I had looked at hiring other people, but I just didn't have the space then. Now, when I was sick and I decided I was going to come back, I went back and forth about whether I was going to go back to my, a regular job or whether I was going to reopen, and that really did open my eyes and make me realize that this is really what I want. Because when I started looking at jobs, I started looking at the time restraints. I started looking at how much I was going to make and how much vacation they gave and how much sick time. And I was like, I can't do that. I couldn't make myself reapply for these jobs. And so I was like, you know what? If I'm going to do this, we're going to go big. I'm not going to come back small like I was before. I'm opening this door for something better. I want more therapists. So I am hiring a few more massage therapists and a few more estheticians, a few more ladies who want to wax, and a few ladies that want to do nails. And I am primarily, my goal is woman owned. So I am looking at women. I'm not excluding the guys.
No,
you guys are so important. But, this space is designed for the stay-at-home mom that needs a job. The small entrepreneurs that want to be able to put stuff in a store and have, have a brick and mortar space. And so that is my goal, is to really feed into this community here, reach the people, reach the vendors, and have this space be a welcoming space for everybody.
I think that's beautiful. I think that people do need their spaces. It's not about segregation or keeping somebody out of it or not, but there are groups of people that identify with each other, and for having that space for women, that's necessary. So I think that's really great. I think a lot of people see, especially like on TikTok and social media nowadays, that like the small business is, the grind. It's all about grinding and, working hard and doing all this stuff. And I don't think that people see the flashy part of it, the success. We've made it. I have this car. I have this money. I did this with my small business. You can do it too. Those kinds of things. But they're not seeing the late nights, the hours and hours of research, and being in here painting, or having your flooring installed, or all the 900 things that go into being a business owner that you kind of have to do yourself. As being the business owner, a lot of people see the successes and they don't see that, okay, you had to be your marketer, and you have to be your cashier, and you have to be your main massage person, and you have to be all these things at one time, and it doesn't really shut off when you leave the store. Of course, you try and break that off and be with your family, but mentally you're still always thinking about, how can I improve my business? What can I do differently? Who can I contact? And that kind of thing. So along your journey, what do you think the single most beneficial thing that you've done for yourself in this business would be?
Is staying consistent.
Staying consistent.
That routine has really helped me. I stopped being like, oh, I'll go into the shop tomorrow. Oh, I won't go in the next day. Now I'm like, okay, I wake up every morning, 9:00, I'm at my computer. I do my emails, I check my text messages, I reach out to clients, I reach out to vendors. I make an effort every morning to spend, even just 30 minutes of just working into that sort of stuff. Then of course I have mom stuff. So then I've got, a few other things, but I'm in the shop. Now I have somebody here. So we're open, Tuesday through Friday, 9 to 12 every day. Because that consistency really made it feel like a business. And I think that's what the big change for us was that I'm now treating it like it's a job, and it's not just, oh, I'm the boss, I don't have to be here. That's one of the hardest things for me as a self-employed person, was being too lenient because I didn't have anybody to answer to.
Right, you're answering to yourself, so it's kind of like, hey, me, can I go outside and take a break?
But you're not just answering to yourself. My clients depend on me to be here, and that's was a big turning point for me in this whole business, was realizing that, that consistency helped both sides. It helped me stay accountable to myself because I had this routine, but it also made me available to my clients. When you're not available and your hours all over the place, I feel like I lost a lot of business doing that, because people expect you to be in the store like business, like some sort of business hours.
Normal working hours.
Right.
Yeah. When they're available. They're looking for help during the day when they're doing their things, not, during the evening or whenever the free time you thought you had was.
Yeah, and I think another thing I learned through a lot of the business classes I took was most people need to be exposed to something like over 10 times before it really sinks in. So that consistency is great. You have to be posting, you have to be, reaching out in some form, whether it's an email, a text message, Facebook posts. People need to see that, and we need to see that. Because how many times have you bought something off the first time you saw it?
Oh, that never happens. They show you something on Facebook, you scroll through and be like, man, I've seen that 10 times. And then maybe you'll click on the website and then look at it again and be like, okay, maybe. And then maybe you might not purchase, and it comes back around again, and then you do purchase. So I understand.
Yeah, that consistency is so important on both sides. Just being available, as a business, and, that person that they're looking for, as well as the exposure.
All right. So, speaking of the community, if someone in the community wants to support you, whether it's visiting the studio, taking advantage of some of the classes that you're going to be having, or getting a massage, what's the next best step for them?
The next best step is just word of mouth. My business has really thrived by people referring me to friends and family. So just coming into the store and saying hi, meeting us, and just being part of this community. We're going to have events coming up. We're going to have, all these vendors that are going to be putting their stuff in here. It's going to be great for the community just to come in and see what's here, because that's how people are going to learn about us. That's how we're going to, introduce you to things that you didn't even know you needed, services you didn't even know existed. So I think for us, that biggest thing is the exposure, just having people come by and stop by.
I got you. And besides the consistency, if someone else out there has a dream, but maybe they're feeling stuck or lost or not sure how to proceed, what would be your advice to them?
My biggest advice was don't wait until it's perfect. Everybody has this, I speak to a lot of people all the time about business. And the biggest thing that people say to me is, hey, I'm going to start this next year. Like when my finances in the right place, when I'm married, when my kids are 2 years old, when my kids is in school. And I think that's the worst way to look at things, because we all know life never goes the way we want it to, ever. And if I had to wait until everything was perfect, I would never have a business. So starting is better than perfect.
Yeah, that's a really great piece of advice, because I've been guilty of that myself before in the past, where it was like, if I'm going to do this, I have to have all the right equipment, and then I spend hours looking at the most expensive equipment, and I'm like, well, I need X amount of dollars to get all the equipment to do this. And then you see someone on TikTok who's like, I did this, it's not perfect, the quality's not great, but I did it and I'm getting traction. And then once they got the traction and the money started coming in, then they were able to upgrade to get that, better quality equipment that was going to cost an arm and a leg.
Right. And I think that is the biggest fault for most people, is that we're all waiting for our finances to line up, or to meet the perfect partner, or, to have the perfect family, or whatever it is that's holding you back. But that first step is the hardest.
Okay. Well, I think that pretty much covers all the questions I had for you, Danielle. Is there anything else that you'd like to get out to the public? Anything parting words you want to share?
The most important part about this business is that we really are customizing everything to you. I don't want this to be a one size fits all. When you come in here, we treat you like family. We know you by name. We remember things about you. We remember what you like and don't like, and that's the biggest and most important part of my business. Is I really want to connect with the people that walk through this door. I don't want you just to leave like it's a service like every other place. I want you to feel the best that you can feel, and I want you to feel like we actually genuinely care.
All right. Well, you guys heard it here first on Legends of the Realm. This is Danielle, and she's here to stay in the community and to make a big impact. So everyone here local in Alta Vista, Virginia, come by and check her out and show some love and support, and we appreciate you guys watching.
Thank you. Yep.
Here we go.
So, like I said, we got vendor space back there. We got all of our product. We have a coffee area, tea area.
This is the space for the vendors, you said? All these shelves
so
here?
All the shelves here are vendor space.
Okay. Lots of shelves, lots of opportunity.
Yes, we have plenty of space for vendors, and plenty of different size space. We've got hanging space, we've got shelving space, we've got floor space.
Okay.
We have a projector here, so we can do classes. We do offer for people who want to teach classes or hold events. We can do events here too.
Okay.
And we have a nice big bathroom here. Everything is ADA, so wheelchairs, walkers, all of that.
There we go. Okay.
We have a sitting area. This is for our clients. They're allowed to come back and sit here. There's a water station. There's a place for them to sit and relax. This is our treatment room number 1. In here. This is our main treatment room. We have a full functioning shower and a sink, so we can do wet treatments and dry treatments in here. And the clients, our VIP clients, are allowed to use the shower before or after their services.
Okay.
So that they don't have to worry about coming straight from work. They can come here and shower. This is our treatment room number 2. This is our facial room. We do most of our facial treatments in here. This room is a joint room, so we can use it as a couples room. So if you want to do 2 services, you can do a second service on this side. So I have a husband and wife coming in, get a facial, get a massage, get 2 facials, whatever it is, but this is our couples room. So we have 2, and then we do waxing on that side.
Okay. That's awesome.
Yeah. So we really went above and beyond about making all of our spaces multi-purpose. And that's
Every legend has a story. If you feel yours deserves to be told, visit tribusmedia.com and apply to be featured. We'll see you in the realm.